Well, hello everybody. I hope you're doing great today. It is Sunday, February 2nd, so we are finally done with January. I am actually really relieved. I know February isn't much better, but it means that we are 1 month closer to spring. So that's great news. Some more great news is that we are about to read chapter 11 of My Family Divided. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get it right into it. Chapter 11, Second Family. The summer I lost my parents, it was the strangest kind of heartache. No friends gathered to grieve. No flowers were sent. No memorial service was planned. And yet the two people I'd cherished most were gone. Not gone from the world itself, but gone from me. I didn't get to see Papi the afternoon he was deported. Immigration officials hadn't given us a heads up, and since it happened in the middle of a weekday, Amelia couldn't leave work. As much as I wanted to cling to him, in a way it was simpler to miss the final meeting to avoid seeing him suffer. I hadn't expected a fairy tale ending, but I hadn't expected one so abrupt either. There had been no closure. Seeing my parents with their spirits broken, their heads dropped, had brought almost more sorrow than my heart could hold. But the more I lingered in the grief, the less I could function. So a little at a time, I strived to create a so called new normal. At 14, I knew that I needed to look ahead. Amelia was wonderful to me. She, Gabriella, and her other two children, both of whom were in their 20s, made me feel like part of the family. They were beyond hospitable, and yet I knew I was a guest. Mi casa es su casa, any polite Latino host will tell you. But I had this nagging fear that I might do something to get myself thrown out. So I, aware of the major sacrifice she was making to have me there, went out of my way to respect boundaries. All right, let's go ahead and answer the first question. Why was Diane's separation from her parents especially difficult? You'll find what you're looking for right here. I hadn't expected a fairy tale ending, but I hadn't expected one so abrupt either. There had been no closure. A sentence starter could be her separation was especially difficult because blank. Perfect example. I took up as little space as possible. I stuffed my few belongings into Gabby's bottom drawers in one closet corner. I stored my toiletries inside a travel bag rather than on the sink top or in the shower. With 5 people in the house, things were already cramped. I didn't want to make Amelia or her children regret her choice to take me in. I also recognized how much responsibility she had as a single working parent. I did all I could to lighten her load. Without her having to ask, I vacuumed and dusted. Each time I used a plate, I washed it, dried it, and put it in the cabinet. Between meals, Gabriella would sometimes grab a snack from the fridge. I got Amelia's permission before I ate anything. You know, Gabriella would tease me, you don't have to ask my mom every time. I was so mindful of not rocking the boat that you can imagine how upset I was if I somehow did. Several weeks into my stay, Gabriella pulled me aside. Can I talk to you for a sec? She asked. Sure, I said. My throat tightened. Was I getting the boot? I know you don't mean for this to happen, she continued, but my sister has been finding a lot of your hair in the bathroom. I wrinkled my forehead. My hair? Yep, she answered. It sheds. Before you leave the bathroom, can you please clean it up? I'm so sorry, Gabriella. I promise I'll do that, I said, the tears welling up. From then on, I was careful about my hair. After untangling my straight long mane, I thoroughly wipe down the sink and pick up every single strand. All right, let's go ahead and answer the next question. Why was Diane so careful around Amelia's house? Make sure you pay attention to these few sentences right here. With 5 people in the house, things were already cramped. I didn't want to make Amelia or her children regret her choice to take me in. You can also use a sentence starter. Diane was so careful around Amelia's house because. All right, let's go ahead and continue. Papi sent money as promised. If Amelia gave me a few dollars, I held on to it. I could make 50 bucks last for weeks. I love being able to buy small things for myself, like juice or pizza or tampons. I was smart and careful about my purchases. I couldn't wait to turn 16 so I could get a job. Financial independence was the goal. While kids my age were talking about fashion or giggling about crushes, I was figuring out how I could make it on my own. My parents' deportation had made a mini adult of me. I craved my family, my roots, the people who had raised me and witnessed me from day one. I longed for the simplest experiences, watching a silly movie with Papi, or Mommy making me hot tea when I had cramps. I missed my parents most on one night in particular, Springfest. I nearly decided to pull out of the duet because I was so shaken up, but I owed it to myself to go out there and rock it. Mr. Stewart, Damien, and I had worked hard. It would have been a shame to let our song go unsung. The night of the concert rolled around. Amelia and Gabriella came to support me. So did Sabrina and her mom Eva. Dude, you're going to be fantastic, Gabriella told me before I went backstage. We'll be cheering you on. Everyone had a part. There were students of opera, jazz, classical, and chamber music. Our duet was at the end of the show. Mr. Stewart gave Damien and me our cue, and we strode to our microphones. I peered out across the audience. There was a sea of parents and siblings, teachers and administrators, people from the community. Even as I was about to perform, I was pinching myself that I'd been chosen. Damien delivered his opening lines beautifully. Then came my cue. I closed my eyes, letting the audience fall away and tuning into the music. In a world that's moving too fast, I sang softly. In a world where nothing can last, I will hold you. I will hold you. My voice shook with nerves, and the words I'd practiced over and over now suddenly seemed new, different, emotional. So stay with me and hold me tight, we sang in unison, and dance with me like it's the last night of the world. The piece ended up with beautiful harmony, if I do say so myself, and the room erupted in applause. Damien and I linked arms and bowed. I peered out again over the scores of faces, praying that, by some miracle, I'd spot Mommy and Papi. Amid the bright lights and magic of that stage, the impossible seemed possible, even for the briefest of moments. Growing up, my parents played the music and prepared the foods of their homeland. They told Eric and me stories from their childhoods. We talked frequently to our loving aunts, uncles, and cousins on the phone. A few even visited Boston. So over the years, though I never visited Palmyra, Colombia, in a way, I felt like I'd been a dozen times. In July 2001, 2 months after my parents' arrest and just after their departure, Poppy arranged for me to spend a month there. In the days leading up to my trip, I was as excited as I was nervous. How would it feel to see my parents again? What would their living conditions be? And was it safe there? As soon as my relatives heard I was coming, they began putting in requests for me to bring American gifts, such as Victoria's Secret lotion and Snickers candy bars. Poppy warned me to keep a close eye on my bags. A week before takeoff, Poppy admitted some tough news to me. Your mother and I have decided to separate, he said. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. My heartbeat sped up. What are you talking about, Poppy? We're no longer speaking to each other, he said. When you come here, you can spend time with each of us, but don't expect us to do things together. I nearly dropped the phone. All the bickering, the blaming each other for their circumstances had threatened my parents' relationship for years. Deportation was the final blow. Once in Colombia, they had gone their separate ways. Mommy moved in with her brother. Poppy stayed with his sister. They lived minutes away from each other as they had growing up, but now they were worlds apart. With a heavy heart, I set out for Palmyra on the eve of my 15th birthday. Be careful and call me once you're there, Amelia told me as she dropped me off at Logan International Airport for the long flight. All right, let's go ahead and answer the next question. What news did Poppy share? You'll find that very bad news in this paragraph right here. A week before takeoff, Poppy admitted some tough news to me. Your mother and I have decided to separate, he said. You can use the sentence starter. Poppy shared the news that blank. All right, let's go ahead and continue. Mommy and Poppy had told me they'd meet me in the airport lounge of Alfonso Bonilla Aragon in Cali, Colombia. Upon landing, I walked curiously out of the aircraft to find them. I couldn't help noticing a swell of music in the air. It grew louder with every step. I furrowed my brow. Was this what I thought it was? Yes. My mother had hired a full band to celebrate my arrival. Balloons, streamers, and a sign that read, Welcome to Colombia, Diane, filled the waiting area. Members of my extended family and mommy's neighbors all cheered, called out my name, and snapped photos. So embarrassing. I met eyes with Mommy and Poppy, both of whom were waving madly at me. Astonished, I tried to put on a half smile. After all, it's not every day that you get serenaded. The whole thing was pretty funny. Well, sort of. You're here! Mommy shrieked. She rushed toward me with a hug. Poppy stood aside as we embraced, and then he leaned in and kissed me on the forehead. Hello, Chibola, he said. I'm glad you made it. I noticed that my parents didn't speak much to each other, but at least they'd made the effort to pick me up together, for my sake. Meanwhile, the band played on. People I didn't know pushed bouquets into my hands. Finally, we all made our way outside through the sliding doors. First stop, a party at my aunt's place. My uncle drove Mommy and me there. As you know by now, my mother can be chatty, but on this day, she was completely wound up. She hurled question after question at me. How's Amelia? She asked. Before I could answer, she was on to the next topic. Did you bring the lotion and all the other gifts for the family? And how did Springfest turn out? I squinted through the car window, dazed and silent. It was humid in downtown Cali. Locals on bikes weaved in and out of traffic. Old stylish cars, models I hadn't seen in America, honked and switched lanes without signaling. Teenagers strutted by in crop tops and skinny jeans. Music rang out from all directions. The entire scene was chaotic, colorful, wild. Then on the road into Palmyra, we saw throngs of barefoot children begging. Some wandered up to our car and pleaded for money or food. Many were juggling limes, trying to earn cash. Mommy, why are there so many children on the streets? I asked. Diane, they're homeless, my mother sighed. Where are their parents? I asked. I don't know, she told me. My eyes filled with tears. I couldn't imagine what it would be like for a 5 or 7-year-old child to be left on their own. In the States, of course, I'd seen homeless people around, but I hadn't witnessed this kind of hardship. I was struck with a realization. This could have been my life. All right, let's go ahead and answer the next question. What did Diane find so disturbing about the road to Palmyra? Make sure you pay attention to this paragraph right here. Then on the road into Palmyra, we saw throngs of barefoot children begging. Some wandered up to our car and pleaded for money or food. Many were juggling limes, trying to earn cash. Mommy, why are there so many children on the streets? I asked. Diane, they're homeless, my mother sighed. Where are their parents? I asked. I don't know, she told me. All of this is going to help you answer that question. You can also use the sentence starter. Diane found blank so disturbing. So make sure you put your answer in this blank right here. And let's go ahead and move on. We pulled up to my aunt's house. Excited relatives filed out of the front door to greet us. Among the faces, I saw Eric. I lit up. How are you, sis? He asked, picking me up and twirling me. You're so tall now. He looked different. Better. His face was clean shaven, his complexion bright. During his first months in Colombia, he'd struggled, floating from one family member's home to the next. It had pained him to leave America without being granted the dignity he deserved. But he eventually found work as an English teacher. On the day of our reunion, he seemed happy. I'd stay with Mommy first. Both of my parents lived in tiny adobe homes in working class areas. In the United States, their neighborhoods would be considered quite poor. Many of the residents, for instance, had only cold water. You had to be wealthy to afford hot. Come on in, Mommy said, as we walked through the door of my uncle's 3 bedroom house. Make yourself comfortable. I rolled in my suitcase, set it aside, and began glancing around. I was shocked at how my mother was living. The den was empty. With no money for a sofa, she used folding metal chairs to sit. In the kitchen, a washboard and bucket leaned near the sink. Mommy had to clean her clothes by hand. With no AC or fan, she labored over the hot stove to prepare meals. I followed my mother into a rear bedroom. There, she shared a tiny space with my young cousin. He slept on the top bunk, she on the bottom. Because she had no dresser, she lived from her bag, the one I'd hurriedly packed for her. She reached down, pulled out a coat from her luggage, and chuckled. So why'd you put this in here? She smirked. In this climate, I certainly didn't need a coat. I rolled my eyes. She went on to mention that I'd accidentally given her mismatched shoes. I knew my mother was half joking, but her complaining annoyed me. How was I supposed to know what to pack that night? Didn't she understand the stress I'd been under? I did my best, I murmured. At least you got a bag. Here's the truth. I felt sorry for my mother. At the same time, I blamed her for our predicament. By reopening the case in New Jersey, she made herself vulnerable to deportation. I knew she did it because she wanted citizenship so badly, but it still made me angry. Even still, I blamed her for the less than cautious way in which she'd handled the situation. And I can't tell you how angry that made me. I dealt with my resentment by going out a lot, mostly with other family. I'd clicked with 3 of my cousins, Andre, Felipe, and Lena. All were within a couple years of my age. Want to go out tonight? Felipe would swing by and ask. Sure, I'd say, glancing at Mommy's face to check with her. She didn't hold me back from having fun, even if it meant spending less time together. With my cousins as my tour guides, I experienced a side of Colombia I loved. There, teens have more freedom than in America, so we'd be out for hours without even checking in at home. We ate, went to the movies, the park, the mall. We danced all night at salsa clubs. Even with its many issues, the country has this amazing energy, this irresistible vibrancy that draws you in. From the moment I stepped off the plane, people were all over me. I felt like a celebrity. Can Diane come over for lunch today? One of Mommy's brothers would call and ask. An hour later, the phone would ring with an additional invitation. Everywhere I went, people wanted to feed me, talk to me, hug me, dance with me, or introduce me to their friends and family. Why all this attention? Because others saw me as unique. I was this American girl who lived what many Colombians considered the dream life. And yet I was also connected to my Colombian roots. This combo made me uncommon. I appreciated all the fuss, but to be honest, I was also overwhelmed by it. My last 2 weeks were spent with Papi. His surroundings were as modest as Mommy's, but he was chill about it. In fact, he was quiet overall, maybe a little down. At dusk, when the humidity had dropped, he'd often take me out biking. One evening, as we returned, I struck up a conversation. Poppy, I asked. Yes, Diane, he said. What is it? Do you think someone turned you and Mommy in? He paused. What do you mean? He asked. One of the guards at the detention center told Mommy that someone probably snitched on you guys. I don't know, Diane, he said. He looked away from me. And at this point, he went on, I guess it doesn't matter. We're here now. Not much I can do about it. We left the mystery at that. On the Sunday of my last week, Poppy surprised me. I want to take you someplace special for your birthday, he said. Just the two of us. In Latin cultures, turning 15 is a big deal for a girl. It marks the beginning of womanhood. Years before, I told my parents I had no desire for a quinceañera, the traditional ceremony complete with white gloves and ball gowns. Not my thing. But I did want some kind of party, and in fact, I'd already had three since I'd arrived in Colombia, one thrown by my mother, a second by my father's sister, and a third courtesy of my cousins. So when Poppy told me he'd top all that off with a vacay, I was thrilled. Where are we going? I asked. I'm taking you to Cartagena, he told me. I raised my eyebrows. Really, Poppy? I squealed. I had heard that the historic city on the Caribbean coast was one of Colombia's most gorgeous. Yes, really, he said, laughing. I used some of my savings to buy our tickets. We'll go this week. I wasn't just excited. I was also grateful for Poppy's generosity. Together, we strolled through the streets of Old Town, savored ceviche at a quaint restaurant, and watched the red golden sunset over the silver waters. The getaway was perfect. At the end of the month, both of my parents went to the airport to see me off. Why don't you come live here? Mommy said. I didn't respond. As much as I relished certain things about the trip, I knew there was no life for me there. Poppy stood quiet. In fact, he never said one way or the other whether he wanted me to move there. He knew I'd already made up my mind. I heard my call to board. I kissed each of them goodbye and set off for the one homeland I'd ever truly known. All right, let's go ahead and answer the last question. Why do you think Diane decides to stay in America? So this question is more about what you think and less about what the book says. But you'll find a blah blah blah. You will find a clue to this question in the last paragraph. Why don't you come live here? Mommy said. I didn't respond. As much as I relished certain things about the trip, I knew there was no life for me there. Poppy stood quiet. In fact, he never said one way or the other whether he wanted me to move there. He knew I'd already made up my mind. You can use a sentence starter. Diane decides to stay in America because blank. All right, everybody, that is it for chapter 11. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a nice little vacation to Colombia. I learned a lot about how life is there. And yeah, I will see you in the next chapter. Until then, take care. All right, everybody, that is it for chapter 11. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a nice little vacation to Colombia. I learned a lot about how life is there. And yeah, I will see you in the next chapter. Until then, take care.